Bandwidth for changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. We move fast and fix things here at changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode Cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Rollbar. Move fast and fix things like we do here at changelog. Check them out at rollbar.com/changelog. Resolve your errors in minutes and deploy with confidence. Catch your errors in your software before your users do. And if you're not using Rollbar yet or you haven't tried it yet, they want to give you $100 to donate to open source via Open Collective. And all you got to do is go to rollbar.com/changelog, sign up, integrate Rollbar into your app. And once you do that, they'll give you $100 to donate to open source. Once again, rollbar.com/changelog. Welcome to JS Party, a weekly celebration of JavaScript and the web. Tune in live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific at changelog.com/live. Join the community and Slack with us in real time during the show at changelog.com/community. Follow us on Twitter. We're at JSPartyFM. And now on to the show.
Hello, party people, and welcome back. It's JS Party time once again, and we have an awesome panel as we like to do every single week. I'm Jared. I'm here. I'm joined by three amazing people. Let's start with Divya. Welcome back to JS Party.
Hello. Happy to be here.
And that's not all. We got K-Ball. Ooh, that rhymed. Nice.
Not all. That's K-Ball. K-Ball rhymes with all sorts of stuff. Hey, happy to be here.
And last but certainly not least is Nick Nisi. What's up, Nick?
Hoi hoi.
Hoi hoi. Is that going to be your call signal from now on? You starting to think?
I think so. That's what Mr. Burns, that's how Mr. Burns answers the phone. Hoi hoi. So
I like it. I actually like it a lot better when you do it with that affectation. So I would suggest keeping it, but doing it just like that next time.
Perfect.
We should do a JS party where everyone adopts an accent. The whole thing.
Oh my goodness. That'd be hard.
That would be terrible.
Just to maintain
That'd
that
be
for
so
45
hard.
minutes. Well, we have awesome segments as always. We're going to start off talking about really the biggest news in our space over the last couple of weeks, which is GitHub's announcement of their very own package registry. Then we're going to turn to some JavaScript trends. There's a nice post put out by the CV compiler folks all about what people are looking for in job skills and the trends that are happening there in the JavaScript land in 2019. And then finish off with one of our favorite segments, which is shoutouts. So look forward to all that. Let's start off with GitHub, the source of all code, the host of most code, and trying to be the host of many packages. So this was a big announcement that happened last week, and it happened kind of in a weird way, if you ask me. Friday afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. I only heard about it because I was at a conference, and then a fellow speaker was like, "Hey, did you hear about the announcement?" And he only knew about it because he worked at Microsoft.
Yeah. So, I mean,
and I was like,
I'm not a PR person, but I know that a common tactic of PR people is when they want to bury a story, like it has to come out, but they don't want it to make it a big deal. They will announce it or put out a press release on a Friday afternoon. And famously, back in, what was it, AntennaGate with Apple, when Steve Jobs held that event on the campus and really wanted AntennaGate just to end back with the iPhone 4, maybe it was. They had this event on Friday afternoon and it was effective. So it just a strange thing. Maybe they're trying to fly under the radar. It's hard for GitHub to fly under our radar because, you know, we are so integrated. I mean, we not changelog, but we the developer community. So maybe they just thought, hey, let's just do it now and people will find out. And maybe, I don't know. What do you guys think about the Friday afternoon live stream?
I saw a tweet about it like 2 or 3 days before, and I thought it was very strange because usually I found out about new GitHub features like on the homepage, right? There'll just be like a little box that says, hey, and it links to their blog and has whatever the new feature is, you know, draft PRs or whatever. But I saw a tweet and I'm like, man, they never pre-announce an announcement like this. So I was pretty excited to tune in and I watched the live stream and was excited about it.
I was there long enough to get the gist of the announcement. And then, you know, it was Friday afternoon. I had other more relaxing things to be doing. So tell us about the stream itself, Nick. I know that, you know, Nat Friedman was up there. They brought up some demos. What was the overall feeling of that presentation?
It looks pretty cool. They kept they did the typical thing with with like announcing new things where they're like, I can't remember the announcer, the presenter's name, but he kept saying, nothing up my sleeve or no tricks here. Like, there's the trying to tell you that it's not magic. This is actually working and it's doing what we're saying it's doing.
Vaporware.
Yeah, which I thought was kind of funny. That was the big takeaway I got from it, other than the actual announcement.
Were they overemphasizing that to the extent where you're like,
maybe this is vaporware?
Maybe I caught on to that, but no, I don't think so.
So the details of this you can find in the show notes, of course. You can just go to github/features/package-registry if you want to read it for yourself. But it says your packages at home with their code. And it says with GitHub Package Registry, you can safely publish and consume packages within your organization or with the entire world. They have, I guess you'd call it a limited set or a starter set of supported ecosystems and language, NPM, Ruby Gems, Docker, NuGet, Maven, and I think that's it. There might be a couple more, but that's at least what they're launching with.
I was really surprised like Python wasn't on there.
Yeah, really?
Like Pip is in there or anything. In Python's a huge community, and I was like, where's Python?
Yeah, is that a diss or is that just a MVP, try to get something out there?
No idea. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense, right? Well, I guess first impressions, maybe, K-Ball, you've been quiet so far. First impressions is just of the concept, okay, now GitHub is going to be a package registry. Whether it becomes, the package registry for some of these ecosystems or not, I think that's still left to be found out. But just that they're moving into this space, what is your initial impressions?
Yeah, so there's two areas of this that I think are super interesting, where GitHub can really make a difference relative to the status quo. One is, I think this makes it far easier to set up internal package registries, to share code inside of an organization, because you don't have to figure out anything new. You don't have to set up your own server to manage it. You don't have to do any of that. You just use the tools you're already using, and you can make internal packages and set up an internal registry. So I think the organizational case for that is really interesting. The second piece that I think is a very interesting possibility that we'll see if we can get to is this potentially allows for kind of end-to-end verification of, is the code that is in a repository that's visible to the world, the code repository, the open source code, is that actually what is being used to generate the package? Because we ran into situations like the event stream hack where there was discrepancy. People were obfuscating what's visible to the world or easily visible versus what's actually getting pushed into the registry. And there's obviously some complications here. Almost nobody's shipping raw code. You're, at least in the JavaScript world, you're probably transpiling it, you're bundling it, you're doing whatever. Though actually in things like Ruby and Python and other languages, that may be less true. But what this enables is at least the potential to do end-to-end validation of, is the code I'm looking at as an open source developer reviewing this actually what's getting installed in my system? That's
really interesting. And I think that's the one main place where they could shine with this is, I was trying to think of how they might do that. And this does work with GitHub Actions right out of the box. You can like have an action that once you push to master, then take that and package it up or something. And maybe like they could have like some kind of badge system where if this package was deployed via this specific action, it gets this badge, and that's like your certified pipeline badge. So it's still up to the packages maybe at that point to set up that verification system, because I'm not sure they could do it in kind of a global way, but at least then that it went through this automated system and not just somebody publishing straight from their desktop.
So Chris in the chat asking the question, is this GitHub or is this Microsoft? And what he means, I think, by that is, and maybe we can't know, but product roadmaps take a long time and huge this is a whole nother area of their business at this point. These things don't, spike out in 3 weeks and then get released. And we know Microsoft has purchased GitHub, probably coming up on a year or 18 months. I can't remember the exact time frame. But the question is like, was this a thing that was already up and moving with previous GitHub management, with different leadership? Or is this a thing that Microsoft came in and said, this is a next step? Because this is a huge next step for them branching out.
Yeah. It's also really exciting because with this, it means that, because a lot of the times with package registries, if you think of NPM and Ruby gems and so on, it's really hard to find, because there's the package registry and then there's where the code is hosted. And a lot of the community is in GitHub. People submit issues, pull requests, they see the code, and you kind of gather in one place and not in the actual package management place.
Right.
And so with this, it's really nice because it seems like a centralized location where people can be like, oh, okay, I can easily discover packages in GitHub, and I can also see what are the open issues and things like that without having to toggle between oh, I'm on NPM and then now I have to go back to GitHub, or do the weird click through, which is where's the GitHub
the
link?
weird click through.
Which
Yes.
I always find myself I've done it so many times, but I'm always where is the GitHub link?
Yes. That's all I do on NPM is just find the GitHub link and then go there.
Right.
Exactly. And it's really frustrating, but yeah, so hopefully this will be much nicer, a better workflow. And like you're saying, Nick, with the GitHub actions, I think that'll be really neat as well, because I find in general, whenever I publish a package, I would have to use the npm CLI, and then it's basically two different things I'm doing. I'd be push to GitHub, and then from GitHub I have to version it, and then I'm be okay, let me go publish it on npm, and then figure out what's happening. Yeah, and I've messed it up a couple of times where I'm wait,
totally.
let me roll back.
So I have a couple questions on this that are perhaps less sunny. So one question is, one of the really nice things about some of the language specific registries right now is you don't have to ask about where do I load things from. I'm not much of a sysadmin person, but I know every time I have to muck with Linux and Ubuntu or whatever, I'm shoot, where do I load these packages from? Some of them are in the default registry. Do I have to add registries? Do I have to do this? Do I have to do that? It's much more of a headache than with Python or Ruby or NPM or JavaScript, where I'm just okay, there is one registry. I'm going to install from there and I'm good. So that's one area where I'm wondering, is this a step towards fragmentation in these language ecosystems?
Yeah.
And then the second one, which is almost the inverse problem, is
centralization, right?
Centralization, right?
I know. I was trying
I kind of like that NPM is a different company than GitHub is a different company than is wherever else. That there's GitLab and GitHub and whatever. If everything's going through GitHub, which is Microsoft, are we continuing to consolidate power in our industry in those top 4 companies?
And this is definitely the embrace and extend part of Microsoft's past history.
3-part strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a weird dichotomy because you do have both concerns. You have a fragmentation concern, and then you have a centralization concern. And I think they're both legitimate. I could see both of them happening in certain ways, and both of them affecting negatively both the already diverse ecosystems and then the kind of the convergent one ecosystem of GitHub. It's tough because inside, but let's talk about it specifically inside the JavaScript land in the front end space. NPM's the only player in the game. I mean, you have other clients, you have the Yarn client. But when it comes to registries, it is NPM, and that has both spurred a lot of flourishment in terms of packages publishing and the ease of use and all that kind of stuff, but then could also be lacking competition on the actual hosting and the registry side of things. So in that regard, GitHub getting into this is basically can put a fire under NPM's butt and say, hey, we got features that you don't have, or we can do things you don't have because we are the source code host as well. And so step up your game. And that could make everybody better.
Just to confirm, do we think that this is directly competing with NPM's enterprise solutions?
I assumed it wasn't. I just assumed it was this was just a way for making the workflow easier, but it wasn't necessarily a competition. I don't know.
I would think it's direct competition myself. I mean, it's public or private, so I think there's definitely Maybe not the on-premise stuff. Maybe, I don't know. But definitely in terms of where enterprises do their packages, I think it's a direct competition.
I do too.
Yeah, if we look at what is their pitch at NPM for the enterprise package, they have enterprise grade JavaScript, whatever that means. But then they also say deduplicate development. So, manage your internal stuff in the same way you manage your open source stuff. And then there's team management, which we also are already doing in GitHub. The only thing they have on here that I haven't seen or I'm not sure is definitely addressed is this like security expertise piece. But yeah, I think most of the value adds that NPM Enterprise have are very much challenged by this.
Yeah. I just want to comment on that enterprise grade JavaScript. It makes me think of, do you guys ever see the enterprise version of FizzBuzz that made the rounds a couple of years ago? So funny. There's like this Java class that does FizzBuzz, the programming, quiz, in the most enterprisey way possible. I'll try to find the code and put in the show notes. It's spectacular. But that's what I think of enterprise grade JavaScript. It's like, are you writing the JavaScript for us, or how's the enterprise grade? Is my code magically better because I'm using you as a enterprise provider?
I mean, there is also a sort of de-risking component here, because I don't know if I'm probably not the only one who's watched like all the NPM related drama on Twitter going down over the last few months.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, with that in the background there's like, I depend on this for an awful lot of stuff. Is this company going to be around in another 3 years?
Can you summarize that without, slamming anybody? The drama.
Yes. So I'm not on the inside on this. I have no context over what is right or wrong. I know that there was some buzz around a set of people being laid off from NPM, and that the assertion made, as I understand it, was that this was done very inelegantly and by a third party coming in rather than direct conversations with the executives, and that perhaps this was done to people who had just recently been hired. So it was done in a way that left a lot of people with a bad taste in their mouth. Following that, I have seen a number of high-profile members of NPM saying that they are leaving NPM, often without saying too much more than that. So not weighing in on the drama and the this and the that. But I remember we did I don't remember if it was JS Party or Changelog, but there was an interview we did with like Jeff Lembeck about NPM is people.
Yeah.
Well, I saw on Twitter that Jeff is leaving NPM. And a number of other folks who have been at least very visible in the community representing NPM have announced publicly that they are leaving NPM. And so it makes me wonder, like, what's going on behind the scenes there. And running a company is bloody hard. And I don't want to, without knowing the background, I don't want to place judgment on one person or another, but it definitely seems like there is a lot of struggle happening there right now.
Well, if they are in distress, this will crank up the stress for sure, as they have now a heavyweight competitor. I guess we'll talk about the state of the package registry right now. Sign up for the beta. So I guess similar to GitHub Actions, which is, I think, still sign up for the beta, which has been a long time, by the way, maybe showing some signs of big ships move slowly.
Google syndrome. How long was Gmail in beta?
Like 12 years, wasn't it? Something like that.
A couple of other interesting bits on this is that it does work within the APIs of the existing like CLI apps that you would use. So you would still use NPM or Yarn for this. And I assume the same thing for Docker and Maven and all of those. I was more just interested in the NPM side of it, obviously. But then it also allows you to have public and private repos. And I think private is only for GitHub Pro. I think
it's free for all now. Like they changed that recently.
For repos, I was wondering about private packages.
For packages.
Yeah.
Actually, it might be pro. Yeah. That would make sense why people go pro.
Yeah. It was giving incentive to go pro. But yeah, that will be interesting. I think that coupled with the things that you can potentially do with like actions or with like some kind of certified pipeline are the things that will make this stand out over just NPM or Ruby Gems or whatever the other package managers are.
Yeah, also like totally separately, but I found it really interesting because when GitHub announced their new registry, GitLab released an article saying like, "Hey, we did this before everyone else." And it was just like an article saying like they did this back in like 2016 or something. And yeah, I was like,
That
okay,
is
cool.
funny.
Like, nice flex, GitLab.
I really want to like GitLab, and every time that I've tried their UI, I'm like, this is so much worse than GitHub. They're just the focus on design, interaction, and UI isn't there. And that, I think they're doing some really innovative things, and I think they've done some great stuff for supporting the open source community and supporting the Vue community, which I love. But their product to me as a developer is pretty inferior relative to GitHub.
GitLab might become the new Dojo. Wasn't Dojo the Dojo already did that?
I was going to make that joke.
Beat you to it. Okay, final thoughts on GitHub. A lot of this, I think, is kind of wait and see. Our prognostications of what might happen, our fears, our desires. It's compelling. Integrated products are compelling. I think there's an ideological tug of war here because, Git is distributed version control, and we've moved a lot of our stuff to one centralized, for-profit company, and now here's a whole nother area which was on a different for-profit company. And now it's like, well, maybe GitHub will be decentralized platform, and that usually ends up bad.
I think over time it's just like Microsoft will start owning everything. Like we use VS Code and then we use GitHub, and now we'll like use their registry.
Right.
They'll just own like every step of the process.
Well, and what's interesting, so there's like 4-ish companies who are dominating the industry right now, right? You have Microsoft, you have Google, you have Facebook, you have Apple. Did I miss any? And I think that's pretty much it.
Did you say Amazon?
Oh, Amazon. You're right. 100% Amazon. Of those, only one seems to have a bad reputation among developers. Facebook.
That's true.
Everybody, like, folks are kind of jumping on the bandwagon of AWS is so awesome, all these great things. Microsoft is so awesome, all these things they're doing. And they are awesome. Like, they're doing a great job of their building great things. And we're letting them continue to consolidate power.
Yeah.
And consolidate, as you say, Divya, eventually all of our stuff on this end will be, using Microsoft products, and we'll be hosting everything on AWS and blah, 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 blah. And if you're not hosting on AWS, you're hosting on Azure or you're hosting on Google Cloud. And it's kind of like, that's a very fragile world to live in. And it's one where individuals have given up a whole lot of power.
Mm-hmm. 2 last points that makes me think of. The first one is that Microsoft, and you just named Microsoft and said that only one has a bad reputation with developers, and that it wasn't Microsoft, it was Facebook. And it's true. Microsoft has been on a very intentional, 5-year process of mending their relationship with the software developers that are not, weren't always inside of the Microsoft Windows camp. And they've done a heck of a job at it. And as it's evidenced by everybody using VS Code, like Divya is saying, everybody's using GitHub and loving GitHub, and Microsoft owns that, and it hasn't been bad for us yet. So it's just interesting how successful they've been at changing their reputation, because public opinion is a very hard thing to sway. The second thought I had is there's an adage mostly about robotics and automation and AI and whatnot, about Amazon, which is, in the next 10 years, Amazon is either going to hire you, like you'll be either working for Amazon or they will put you completely out of business. Like that's kind of the path that Amazon is on, just in the more mainstream space. And so in a lot of ways, maybe in the software space, and set aside AWS, Microsoft might be on that path where they might be the player when it comes to developer tools over the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, but I have not, I think it's only in the recent few years where I've heard people say they would want to work for Microsoft. And I have not heard that in a really long time. And now there are lots of developers, like very talented developers, or who are like, if Microsoft gave me a job, I would take it.
Right.
And so that's like a huge shift. Like, and that probably like moves us to the next segment on like job skills stuff. We can talk about that later, but it's just an interesting way of like how they've positioned themselves. So in the developer community, they're seen quite well now, and they've obviously done a good job. So yeah.
Just to close it, there's a Twitter account, NPM Parody, that speculates on what NPM might actually stand for, and I saw a tweet from them. Nobody predicted Microsoft.
I believe that NPM account was created specifically when the package manager was announced.
Oh, really?
All of their tweets are May 10th.
Oh,
Could
weird.
this be
Conspiracy.
the new Horse.js?
Horse.js has longevity. They first tweeted May 10th. They last tweeted May 10th.
Oh, it's a one and done kind of thing.
This is a one-hit wonder Twitter account.
This episode is brought to you by Linode, our cloud server of choice, and we're excited to share they've recently launched dedicated CPU instances. If you have build boxes, CI/CD, video encoding, machine learning, game servers, databases, data mining, or application servers that need to be full duty, 100% CPU all day, every day, then check out Linode's dedicated CPU instances. These instances are fully dedicated and shared with no one else, so there's no CPU steal or competing for these resources with other Linodes. Pricing is very competitive and starts out at $30 a month. Learn more and get started at linode.com/changelog. Again, linode.com/changelog.
Next up, we turn our focus to JavaScript trends. The fine folks at CV Compiler have a interesting research and analysis they did. They call it Game of Frameworks, JavaScript Trends of 2019, wherein they went out and surveyed, I think it was 300 different job postings in April from around AngelList, Stack Overflow, LinkedIn, etc. And they compiled them down to find out what companies are posting about, which skills specifically inside the JavaScript space companies are looking for, and they produced a nice chart. We will link all that in the show notes if you want to look at that chart. I'll tell you right now that React is numero uno, so it wins the Game of Frameworks, I guess, even though, is it a framework? I don't think it's a framework. That being said, how do we define these things? No JS is on there, so is it a framework?
I think it's just
Git is on there. Is Git a framework?
Yeah, I think they called it
this
skills.
Is skills, not
yeah,
framework.
It's like
I know, but it was
skills.
called Game of Frameworks. I know it's a Game of Thrones reference, but it's like, where are the frameworks? Anyways, I'm nitpicking.
Not a good reference.
Point. Yeah, trying too hard.
The thing that immediately stuck out to me was number 7, Java. And I'm immediately thinking of this, is it just people spelling it Java space script?
Oh.
Do people not realize that the Java and JavaScript are different things? Like, those are the two things that I immediately
That might be a legit situation if they're just, going out and regexing a bunch of job postings, and somebody put a space between. I'm going to have to follow up and ask them on
Luckily, script is not number 8. So
we need scripting skills, nunchuck skills.
You also see things on there like SQL and Python and stuff. So I think one of the things that draws to my notice is like folks don't want someone necessarily who's only paying attention to JavaScript. You need to understand some of the backend technologies that you're going to be interacting with.
Mm-hmm. jQuery top in the top 10 there. Still legitimate.
I'm so I'm a little sad that Vue is like so low on that list. Why is it so low? It's like below Python. What?
Python is actually ridiculously popular, but yeah, this is supposedly JavaScript
For
jobs,
JavaScript developers. I mean, yeah.
hey, at least your framework's on there.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, not featured things like Dojo.
Well,
Ember,
TypeScript is there, Nick, so he's
Yeah.
I think it is kind of interesting to think about this. I mean, it's hard to know without trend lines, right? To how much we should be considering this, but this is an interesting snapshot.
It's a snapshot
of what are people looking for? I do wonder, it says 300 job listings, and then it has numbers next to them. So I'm wondering, like, is this 267 job listings out of 300 featured React? And if so, why does Angular have 195? Right? Are these saying, oh, React or Angular? Like, that seems a little off.
I bet they probably are. I mean, there's some job listings out there where they'll just list off a laundry list of skills that you should have in there, and it'll be a comma separated list.
You should know React, Angular, Vue.js, and
right. 14 years of experience with GraphQL, stuff like that.
And there's also general ones, which is like not really tech specific. There's like OOP, and then I think those design patterns as well, which I was like, that's interesting because that's very general and subjective.
The one that's curiously missing from here is JavaScript. It's not on there at all.
Maybe it's presupposed.
Probably, but like that's what we focus on in our interview process is fundamental JavaScript. No framework, no TypeScript, no Webpack, no Java, JavaScript.
What about in your listings? Is that how it is as well?
Yeah, I think so. I will have to double check that though.
Ooh, now we got a quick look. It does. So let's step back a little bit from making fun of these folks because I mean I think there are things to make fun of, but it's actually a really hard problem if you're sort of cross-cutting, which I think they cross industries, to like look at what are people putting in resumes and use that to derive something interesting. Like that's a very hard problem. But what do we think this indicates about, finding a job right now in tech doing JavaScript? Like, are there insights that we can draw from this with our additional industry context?
Mm-hmm.
I think the expectation is much higher. So like, yes, you should know JavaScript, but there's also this expectation that you also know all these frameworks, just like TypeScript, or you've worked with Webpack. And so for someone who might be newer or who has just like started picking up skills, it's really overwhelming. And I've talked to a lot of people who've gone through boot camps or are fresh out of school, and they're like, what should I focus on? I'm like, usually my answer is just get really good at JavaScript or like whatever it is you want to do. Because I think the flavors come and go. Like there's a lot of frameworks that come in, and like React is popular now, but like who knows what will happen in 5 years. And so like you're saying, Nick, just like a solid understanding of one thing and then working your way through. But I find a lot of job descriptions tend to just give you the laundry list of everything. And that's like really hard for someone who's looking for a job to be like, wait, I only have one of this or two out of like 20.
Yeah, for sure. I think that if you have a good, firm understanding of the fundamentals, you can really jump in and pick up Vue or React or anything pretty quickly. It's just JavaScript.
Just
JavaScript. I've actually been doing a lot of research on some of this question of like, what are the skills that we expect of people at different levels? Because I'm working on a new project focused on training tech leads, so people who are a little further up in the skill ladder. But as a part of that, I'm like researching this whole progression. And I found a really interesting resource that I'd like to share at progression.fyi, and which is a gentleman in England who has put together essentially a collection of all these different sort of career progression charts that different companies have published for engineering and for design. So various companies have written about their progression charts, open source things, whatever. And shout out, by the way, to Natalie Marlani, who I met at React Amsterdam, who pointed me at progression.fyi. So it's super cool stuff. But this guy, Johnny Birch, has put this together. And one of the things I've found pouring through these is different companies call these different levels different things. Like at one company, they might call it engineering 1 versus junior developer versus this, that, and the other. But there are a lot of commonalities across them. And this isn't going to tell you which skills in terms of like, should I be learning React versus whatever. But like if you're entry level and you're junior, typically what you're going to be doing is you're going to be working on pretty well-defined tasks, doing bug fixes, and really learning how to learn. And so like your focus should be kind of figuring out how to go deep. Pick one specialty, go deep. If you're in the front end, maybe you pick React or something. Pick one framework, go really deep on that. And don't worry about all the other stuff, because junior developers are not being asked to integrate across 5 different things. They're like focused within one area. And then as you sort of go up the hierarchy a little bit, you get into mid-level, 2 or 3 years in. Now you should be able to do something on your own within your area of expertise and start to get touching other things. So that's when you're going to start to branch out into other skill areas. But yeah, if you're just coming out of a boot camp, don't try to do all the things. Pick one, go deep on it.
That's a really interesting take. So would you say in 2019, if you're going to pick one to go deep, it seems like you can't miss with React right now.
If you are in the front end, you pretty much and you're looking for something that's going to get you a job, React is probably your best choice.
Sorry, Vue.js. Sorry, Divya.
Vue still cool.
It's still cool. So Rich Howell in the chat is also a Vue developer and is currently applying for work and can confirm that it's pretty low on people's list. He says, thankfully, his Vue experience transfers over to React pretty well. So that's one thing that you'll find over time is a lot of the skills from all these things transfer over. There are some like if you've dive in, I don't know, if you're deep into Angular and like the bugs, the workarounds for the bugs, that skill will not translate. Like maybe your process of finding those workarounds absolutely will, but how exactly to interact with this API because you've gotten that deep into it. That itself probably won't transfer over to another one because they're not going to have that bug. They're not going to have that specific API. That being said, the general themes and architectural things in a lot of these frameworks will transfer over. So a lot of I think what happens with people is they just get analysis paralysis, and it's just like, what do I pick? What do I do? I spend most of my time reading articles like this of which one, because it's such a huge decision. And I guess my point here is just realize it's not that huge of a decision, and maybe just optimize for something like this. Like, well, most jobs here, I'm just going to learn that one and go from there. And it does seem like today, although maybe tomorrow Vue will be, higher up. But if you're going to just pick one and dive deep, it seems like React is, in 2019, your best bet.
Yeah, there are some mega trends that are showing up across the board that, to your point, like if you learn in one example, it will then be easy to branch out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So staying in the front end world, I think there are also some mega trends in the back end. But in the front end world, component-oriented development, thinking about things as a set of components that can be interact and plug and play. Like React is doing that, Angular is doing that, Vue is doing that, Ember is doing that, Dojo is doing that, Mithril is doing that, Svelte is doing that. Like that is the approach that we're going. So start in React because it's easy to get a job there. Dive deep, but have in mind, okay, how am I thinking about components? What are the boundaries? How are we doing that? That understanding, that knowledge, that experience is going to translate no matter what framework you end up moving to in the next job or whatever. Similarly, things like declarative coding, right? We are increasingly moving to a declarative paradigm for our components. We're not imperatively doing things. We're thinking about, here's what this thing should be, and letting frameworks handle how and when. And that's another place where, if so long as what you're working in is doing that, which means maybe not focusing on jQuery, but if you're doing React, those skills are once again going to translate. So there's a lot of these mega trends. I identified 5 in a blog post earlier this year, but if you look for the bigger picture questions and start learning those within the context of one thing you're going deep on, you're not going to end up in trouble when suddenly, the flavor of the month changes.
I'm going to assume that's what that list meant by design patterns. To be general, declarative versus imperative, and how you do something in React, which is overall very specific to the framework. But the pattern of doing it can be used in Angular and can be used in Vue if you just change some syntax and the structure, but essentially they all call it different things, but they might mean the same. So it's just kind of if you master one framework and just know it really well, translating can be frustrating, but at the same time, you have the tools and you have those patterns that you already are familiar with, and they will probably translate quite easily once you get used to a different syntax and everything. So also, have you seen, like, I think I posted in the chat, but have you seen that tweet that Emma like tweeted a couple of days ago about like React being the kid who cut school and then Vue being the nice kid in school? She was trying to like immortalize the different technologies, and I thought it was really funny. And CSS is like the flaky, unpredictable one. It's so funny.
That is funny. We'll have to include that one in the notes as well. One other thing that I noticed in here, and then I want to kick it over to maybe Nick to talk about backend too, because Node is popular, but inside of Node, like what do you learn? What do you dive into there if you're thinking more backend JavaScript? Is that there are a lot of things on this list. I'm not sure how long this list is, maybe 20 items. I didn't count them, and they aren't numbered. But there are lots, like 4 at least that I'm just staring at that have specifically to do with testing. So unit testing is one, Mocha, another one, obviously a very specific testing library, continuous integration, which you can't really use without tests, Jest, TDD, like these are things in here. So in terms of big trends, especially in the dynamic language space, now the TypeScript's in there as well, which might mitigate some of the tests that you have to write. And Nick can probably gush on that in a minute, but learn how to write automated tests for code, because yes, the specifics of the way you do it in this language, how do you mock in this language versus that, etc., may not transfer over, but the skill of being able to write a test to fully exercise a piece of code, you'll use for the rest of your career. So absolutely, that is something that is trending and will continue to trend until we have machines that write all our tests for us. But then we have to, who's going to test the machines, What about the back end, guys?
I think that there's a core set of skills that you need to know about the back end as well, just in a similar way that there is about the front end. And the primary one that comes to mind when I'm thinking about back end JavaScript, it seems like everything kind of stems from Express in some way, at least in what I've seen.
Just learn.
I'm currently
Express.
using a project called Nest.js, which is like a TypeScript wrapper around Nest or around Express, but it adds, it makes it more Angular-like is the way I describe it, but in a good way.
Give the elevator pitch on Express. Explain what that is.
It's a way to set up a way to handle routes for a backend. So you can define and say, when your server gets a call to this request, like this URL, effectively, run this function and deliver something back. But then it gives you the ability to add in middleware and other things. So you can plug in and say, like, this route is only available to administrators. So before you actually serve it, double check this route specifically and make sure that it's the user is authenticated to be able to see it. And if not, throw them back an error. Otherwise, run the function, and kind of abstracting that away so that you don't have to think about it on every single request.
Anybody have anything to add on the back end space, trends, what to learn, what to avoid maybe?
I think one thing that is tricky both on the front end and the back end, and I think is something that is probably, like, judging from what I've seen, something that you start to really wrap your head around a little later in the game. Certainly a year or two at least into your career if you're coming from boot camp. And we have focused very much on early career folks for this conversation. But
yeah,
it's data manipulation and data management, right? How do I think about taking data, transforming it, using it in different ways, whether that's on the back end, saying what are the data stores that I'm working with and how do I normalize my data and doing that, or on the front end saying, okay, I'm loading this data from APIs, but it may not be exactly what I need for my UI unless I'm using GraphQL, or if I am using GraphQL, thinking about how do I generate those queries, and sort of that way that data flows through systems and you can manipulate it, and thinking about things like transformations and mapping and all that stuff. Like, that seems to be something that is a little harder for folks to pick up than the kind of sort of first UI logic, or in the back end sort of first logic around, okay, I'm setting up these routes and this type of thing. But really starts to be important as you go forward. And that seems like you're just thinking about data and how data flows through an application is something that it's not really well captured in one particular tool here, but definitely is something that I've seen folks struggle with, and that is really important as you start to move from entry level to a little bit more senior.
For sure.
I think especially since it moves past just working on like small features, and you have to think about the overall architecture and like whether it's scalable and maintainable, and those are the things you have to think about. Just like, how does the data flow? Like, what is the architecture of the backend, and how does it provide data to the front end, and how's the front end like liaise with the backend, and so on. And just understanding that requires like a bit of experience, I think. Just like having worked on different applications, having played around with things, and just, yeah, that's a generally, like, the more senior you get, the expectation is that you know these, like, how to do that and how to like work those problems.
Would you classify tooling as a backend or a front end thing, like Webpack and other tooling like that?
Almost orthogonal.
Yeah. So like, depends on what kind of tooling you're talking about, I guess. Are you talking about back-end tooling or front-end tooling?
NPM.
I would say version control, communication, and things like this cross all those chasms. But tooling's very specific to, I mean, Docker, I guess, would be another one that is general. Containers, that kind of stuff.
I feel like containers moves into like DevOpsy space, where it's
well, at
like,
least to being able to use them, if not to create
just
them,
like
right?
create a Docker file and then like, okay.
That's very much where I'm still at. Is like, I can create a little Docker file and I can like do a
That's
thing, but
usually where I'm at, yeah. And half the time when Docker like doesn't, like, sometimes it has trouble like with hot reloading, and then people will be like, oh, just like restart your whatever, and I'm like, cool. Just turn it on and off again. That's pretty much mine as well. If it doesn't work.
I mean, a lot of tools are like that. Git, you can get by on about 8 Git commands for years, and you're just like, do the magic
100%.
incantation, right?
100%.
Just write them down and use them, and eventually you might figure out. I still don't know exactly how Git works. I know there's a lot of pointers to SHAs and stuff, but I don't know. I just have all the commands memorized, and
I think, and you don't need to use all of them. Like, I think I've only used the git bisect like twice ever, and that was like a mistake.
Yeah, I used
like,
it
I
once,
regretted
and I was like,
it.
oh, I'm never doing this again.
Exactly, because it's just like, I don't know what's happening.
I just decided to write less bugs.
Yeah.
I taught an advanced Git workshop once, and I spent the first hour and a half going through the anatomy of a single commit.
Wow. You should do that on the show sometime.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting things in there.
It does, if you choose to climb that ladder, it does open up a lot of really interesting things. I definitely have been called in more than once to like sort of recover, like, oh my God, I feel like I lost my code, or oh, what happened here?
Yeah.
And just like understanding how Git works, even if you don't necessarily know all of the different commands, but if you have that if you're willing to put in the work to build that mental model of like what actually is happening and where are these things and what are the many ways that I can find and get to them, like it does have benefits that flow out.
I think also when you're starting to have arguments around whether you should squash your commits or do a merge is when you're like, okay, I think I've leveled up my Git skills to a point where you can have an opinion on like one versus the other.
Even if you're Nick and you have the wrong opinion.
Oh.
Wait, what does Nick think?
Squash all the way.
Oh yes, I'm team squash too.
Nick is a pronounced force pusher, so
yeah.
you know who you're talking to. Know who you're alliancing with right here.
I think I've had that opinion on teams before because I'm like, I like clean history, and they're like, well, clean history is like everything, and I'm like, that's not clean. Then you're like sorting through the garbage.
Exactly.
Well, you two can
but
go
often
those are the people who think that haven't used Git bisect.
Often clean history is incorrect history.
Yeah, but
do you want to lie to your friends and family? Is that what you want to do?
most of world history is not like raw. It's been cleaned up and like
it's written by the winners,
which is why it can't be believed. Yeah, exactly. It's untrustworthy.
I want to show things the way that they should have gone.
Right, which could make it very hard to track down what went wrong. Anyway, we're way off the rails here, but it sounds like Jared and I are on one side of a holy debate or holy war, and Divya and Nick are on another.
We may have just found our next segment idea.
This episode is brought to you by Gauge. Gauge is a free and open source test automation tool by ThoughtWorks. The goal of the tool is to take the pain out of test automation, and to help with this, Gauge supports specifications of Markdown, which are easy to read and easy to write, reusable specifications to simplify your code, which makes refactoring easier, and less code means less time maintaining code. And finally, integrations. Use Gauge with your favorite tools and your IDEs in the ecosystem of your choice. Selenium, Sci Pro, CI/CD and CD tools like GoCD, Jenkins, Travis, and IDE support for Visual Studio, VS Code, IntelliJ, and more. Head to gauge.org/JSParty to learn more and give it a try. Again, gauge.org/JSParty.
Okay, folks, one of our favorite segments is shout outs. This is a great opportunity for us to shout out and thank or give props to a person, people, a project, anything really that we think deserves some shout outs, and maybe hasn't got them, maybe has, but we all like to take a turn. So let's start off with K-Ball. Give us your shout outs.
All right. So I want to shout out a category, and then I'm going to shout out 3 particular examples. So the category that I want to shout out is people who are doing work to kind of bridge between design and development and sort of emphasize UI-centric and design-centric front-end development. Because this is a place where stuff often goes wrong, and we've had whole conversations about challenges even within the front-end development space, the divide and various other things. But there's a lot of people doing yeoman's work here. So 3 particular people and instances I'm going to shout out. First, there was a recent article on Smashing Magazine by Stefan Kaltenegger. I probably butchered his name, but he did this article on essentially how you can work to bridge the gap between designers and developers. And it's just kind of a nice kind of walkthrough of things that you can do as a developer or as a designer. I think more focused on the developer to kind of help bridge that gap. And it also referenced out to a cool resource that I hadn't seen before called Can't Unsee, which gives you practice developing your design eye. So that's one of the 3 people I'm going to shout out on this subject. The next one is Ryan Singer, who wrote an article on the Signal versus Noise blog recently about the place of UX and looking at alternative ways of thinking about user experiences, essentially being the boundary between any 2 things that are supply and demand. So one was talking about, okay, between the user and the product, that's where we usually think about it. But actually, this concept of design is really important at every place where you have interactions between different groups. So I think that was really cool. And then the final shout out I'm going to do is for a conference that my friend Dylan Sheeman is involved with organizing. So conference organizers in general deserve shout outs, but this one in particular is a conference called Half Stack, which is focused on UI-centric front-end development. And they are expanding from being only in London to having events in Vienna, New York, and Phoenix, and various other things. So super cool to see this kind of UI-focused development stuff growing and being more present around the world. So props to those 3 people, to Stefan Kaltenegger, Ryan Singer, and Dylan Sheeman, all of whose names I probably butchered.
K-Ball the Butcher. All right, Divya, your turn.
Awesome. So I'm going to shout out to a conference, and someone on this panel is organizing it, NEJS, which is like really cool. And I've spoken at NEJS like 2 years ago, and it was actually my first conference talk. And I feel like the organizers were so cool and awesome, and like the conference itself was wonderful. It wasn't at the zoo, which it is going to be this year, which is super exciting. Also, the theme I'm so excited about.
Yes.
It's Life Aquatic, and it's so cool.
Yes.
And I heard like someone's gonna dress up as Steve Zissou. Like,
yes. Who is this someone you keep referring to?
I don't know.
Could it be Nick Nisi?
Could it be? I'm more interested in who's gonna be the Jaguar shark more than anything. I want to know.
I feel like we have to get that done now.
I feel like Nick will just come out with his kid like dressed as a Jaguar shark.
Oh,
That'd be
Perfect.
so cute.
perfection.
Baby shark.
Yes.
Yes.
Baby.
So
Oh,
Nick,
no,
well,
no,
well, thank you, Div. Yeah, please don't. Please don't. No, it's too late. It's in there.
Yeah, I know. Once it's in your head, you can't get it out. And then this is like another shout out to a tool that Rosebay mentioned on the chat, which is like Quokka.js. And I think so. It's interesting because this is a tool that I recently heard about. And like it's funny that he posted it as well. So I was at Nation.js, which is a small conference, also really great in DC, and Nir Kaufman was one of the speakers, and he's big in the React community in New York. And he spoke about Quokka, and it was so I had never heard of it, and I think it's really cool because it allows you to like prototype. It's like a scratch pad for when you're like working on stuff, and so you're like, oh wait, I'm working with this like library and I don't know how it works, and then you can like kind of just use it as a scratch pad to be like, let me try different things, and then like erase it when you're done without having to like mess up your files and architecture, which I think is so cool and interesting because like even the way that it was presented to me was like, oh, like most of the time you look at a framework and you look at the documentation and then that's how you learn how it works, like a library like Lodash, for example. But with this, it's like you can actually work on the thing, which I've done before. Like I've used RunKit and like various things, which is like on NPM where you're like, okay, I want to like play around with this tool and see what things are doing. But I think Quokka allows you to kind of dig really deep into a specific library or a tool, which is so interesting and neat. Just like from a learning perspective, if you want to like going back to the conversation of like scaling up, be like, I'm a junior developer, to be like, I want to progress. I think that's like such a great tool for you to just like learn about how tools are created, how libraries are architected, and so on. And then the last thing, which is like, so I really like shaders in like just for fun. They don't really do anything for me in terms of like getting me money or a job.
They're doing something.
Well, I get excited about them because I think they're really cool and interesting and totally different. Because I also like thinking of and doing things outside of what I normally do. It's always nice to switch gears. And so sometimes in my free time I work on like WebGL and like GLSL, which is like the shader language for the web. Super cool. And there's a library that I recently heard of called Blotter.js, which is a JavaScript API for drawing like text effects, and it's so cool. And it's done by someone at this hacker school that I went to called Recurse Center. Also a shout out because Recurse Center is awesome. If you've never heard of it, it's like a retreat for developers. So if you're just like trying to find your groove, you need like to be around other people who are working on really interesting things, you can apply. And the idea is that you can work on like a week or a month. No, actually it's a week, 3 months, or I forget the time span. I did it for a week. So it's very like low stakes. You can just take a week off of work, go there, and you get to work on like a project that you're really interested in. So for me, I worked on like WebGL and shaders, which is like something I don't normally do. And be surrounded by like super smart people and like learn about different things. And yeah, so that like definitely like Recurse is a huge shout out. And the community is awesome as well. If you like want to just plug into like a community of developers who are really excited about what they do. That's like not Twitter, because like Twitter has that, but it's also like you have to like kind of sort through the garbage because you can't squash, on Twitter or whatever. But yeah, so those are my shout outs.
Very good. Well, we appreciate the NEJS shout out. Nick, give the pitch here. We got tickets for sale. Well, what's the situation on NEJS?
Tickets for sale. It's August 9th. Our early bird tickets are going right now, and you can pick them up at nejsconf.com. I would say that our CFP is still open, but by the time this goes out, it will not be.
Yeah.
But that's okay because we have a lot of awesome proposals that have been submitted, and we're really looking forward to the painstaking task of having to say no to so many of them, because that's always the toughest part of being a conference organizer. But otherwise, it's August 9th at the Henry Dorley Zoo, the #1 zoo in the world, and according to
Is it really?
many places.
Yep.
I think so. At least it was at one point. But they're constantly...
In the 80s. No, just kidding.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's really cool.
At least in America for sure. Maybe in the world. I believe you, Nick. But it's a spectacular zoo. while we're talking conferences real quick, and I'll get over to you here, Nick, I wanted to mention All Things Open this fall in October. There will be a large portion of changelog folks at that conference. So if you're going to be there, give us a shout out. Let us know. We might organize something like a meetup or a live show or something. There'll be a lot of JS Party people there as well. So just want to give everybody a heads up that All Things Open in October, it's in North Carolina, is a thing that we'll have representation. We'd love to come out and see everybody and come say hi. So that's just a quick one there. Back to you, Nick, on your shout outs.
Wait, I want to chime in on the zoo really quick as a former San Diego resident.
My gosh, San Diego Zoo is the best. Sorry.
So
second best.
I don't know how to judge because I have not actually been to the Omaha Zoo. However, I did look up a little bit of the statistics on them, and it looks like by when was this? At least in a number of years back, by a number of 5 million a year to 1 million a year, there are a lot more people who think the San Diego Zoo is a place worth going.
Now we got a new ground war here. We got Git styles and zoos we can go back and forth on.
That might just be a statement about San Diego versus Omaha.
I think it probably, there's a lot more people. San Diego has pretty nice weather. But in San Diego, I haven't been to that zoo, but I've also heard great zoo. So there's room in the world for more than one awesome zoo, but ours is the best. All right, Nick, your turn.
Yeah. So my shout outs, I'm going to shout out to Renee Rubalcava, and I might be mispronouncing his name, but he's a really cool guy who works at Esri, and he runs a website called Learn-Dojo, and he's just putting out these really cool tutorials on different parts of using new Dojo, and it's just really great to see that out in the community, and they're really great tutorials as well. So shout out to Renee for doing that. And then I just have to shout out to Tim Pope, and specifically for his Vim Fugitive plugin. It's just I just recently learned about the G command. I don't know when that got added, but I've been using like G status and G read and all of these commands to work for the most part with Git. But then I just go back to the command line for things. And with G, you can look at diffs of your commands and then stage those individual hunks right from there, right from within Vim, and you never have to leave. And it's just so nice to be able to curate your Git commits and commit messages all without ever having to leave Vim. So thank you, Tim Pope, for that.
All right, last but not least is my shout outs. And I want to talk about something that maybe you know about, maybe you don't. It is Go Time. So you may know that we have another show that's very similar to this one called Go Time. And a lot like JS Party, where we had it going for a while and we put JS Party on hiatus and we tried to change some things, make things better. And we relaunched with an expanded panel. We had a very similar situation with Go Time. So Go Time went on hiatus for almost a year, but I'm happy to say it's back now. And the panel is spectacular. You may know some of these names: Matt Ryer, Ashley McNamara, Johnny Bursico, Carmen Ando, JBD, Yana Bidogan, and as well as Mark Bates. And I would just say maybe there isn't too much overlap between JavaScript interest and Go interest, but the thing about Go Time is it's not just about Go. In fact, we've rewritten the little blurb, which says that now says a diverse panel and special guests discuss cloud infrastructure, distributed systems, microservices, Kubernetes, Docker, and also Go. So I am not a Go developer. I do have vested interest in Go Time being successful. That being said, I don't have much to do with this show at all, besides I listen to it. And it's a lot like JS Party now. It's a ton of fun. The new panel is spectacular. And they put out some really, really good shows. The last one was Go for Beginners. Very similar to conversations that we're having here about getting into JavaScript and learning those things. But I specifically want to mention episode 84, Hardware Hacking with TinyGo and GopherBot, in which Matt interviewed Ron Evans, aka Dead Program, who is just a very entertaining guy and has tons of information all about robotics. He started the GoBot project, as well as there was a Ruby and a JavaScript version as well. And so that's just a spectacular way of getting to know that show. So I just wanted to thank the new panelists and say, if you haven't heard of Go Time, or you gave it a listen a while ago, it's now a good time to check it back out because it's filled with very awesome people. So I want to thank them, and excited to have Go Time back.
The logo is so cool. Like, I'm just looking at the mesh thing. It's So cool.
Yeah. Yeah, a little gopher hidden in there. All right. Any final words before we call it a day?
There's nothing wrong with force push. In certain circumstances.
Why'd I have to ask?
You should have said everyone but Nick.
I'm going to end the show now before K-Ball starts talking about San Diego Zoo again. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us. This has been a lot of fun. As always, more shows like this at changelog.com/JSParty. Hey, do us a favor. If you like this show, especially for people who are getting into the space learning, give us a recommendation. We would really appreciate it. We love word of mouth. It means we're doing a good job putting out good content for you. And that is actually still, even with all the technology that we have and all the social networks, word of mouth referrals is still the best way that people find and listen to new podcasts. So we appreciate you doing that. That's our show this week. We will see you next time.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to JS Party this week. Tune in live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern at changelog.com/live. Join the community and Slack with us in real time during the shows. Head to changelog.com/community. And do us a favor, share this show with a friend, rate us on Apple Podcast, go into Overcast and favorite it. And thank you to Fastly, our bandwidth partner. Head to fastly.com to learn more. And we move fast and fix things around here at Changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. We're hosted on Linode Cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. Check them out and support this show. Our music is produced by Breakmaster Cylinder. And you can find more shows just like this at changelog.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Congratulations. You've listened all the way to the end of the show. And guess what? Got a little surprise for you. Here's a preview of Brain Science, our upcoming podcast coming out very soon. The easiest way to subscribe is to subscribe to our master feed. Head to changelog.com/master. Get all of our podcasts in one single feed, plus some extras that only hit the master feed, including Brain Science. Brain Science is a podcast for the curious. We're exploring the inner workings of the human brain so we can understand things like behavior change, habit formation, mental health, and this thing we call the human condition. It's hosted by myself, Adam Stacoviak, and Muriel Reese, a doctor in clinical psychology. It's brain science applied, not just how does the brain work, but how do we apply what we know about the brain to better our lives? Here we go. As humans, one of the things that separate us from any other animal out there is the fact that we have language, we have words, and we have super powerful words that truly change how we feel and how we make other people feel. If the words we say have so much potential to influence ourselves and the world around us, how do we begin to understand the power of words?
So words really are the thing that separates us from all other animals. Because, right, sharks, bats, dogs, lizards, they don't talk. And this is really critical when it comes to managing our moods and our feelings. One of the things that I sort of talk about, or even I mentioned earlier about the way in which we file things in our mind according to feelings, this is exactly how we differentiate it too. Thinking about an example like with professional athletes, you might say that they get anxious, like before a race or before, a run or a dive. But using that word, it's not really a threat, right? But their brain would be like, oh, I'm nervous, and now I start this whole sequence of events in my body. Whereas if I just change the word to like, I'm anticipating or I'm excited, it creates a different sort of rollout of emotions as well as physiological responses. I mean, I'm anxious about going to Disneyland is not usually what we say, right?
I'm excited.
Exactly. So it then puts a lid on or files things differently in our mind, which then changes how we feel about it. So in my field, in psychology, we always say name it to tame it. The better I can name different feelings, the more I can tame whatever emotion that is. And so then I'm not really stuck living in this sort of mammal and reptile lane where I'm always just flipping my lid, I'm reactive, I'm angry, or I'm sad. But rather I can go, I recognize this is how I'm feeling, or like I'm afraid of some other threat, like losing my job. And I can go, you know what? Here's the words I can use to talk to myself about that fear so that I'm not just stuck feeling afraid of a possible threat, which has never occurred yet.
You use this concept too to say customized thinking. I'm not sure I fully understand what you mean by customized thinking. What do you mean by that?
Well, because we are human, we do have the power of choice, which is super powerful. Like nobody has to tell you how you need to think or how you need to feel, right? And like your version of success might be very different than mine, which is going to impact my choices and the direction I'm headed. And so when you think about customized, right? I mean, you can customize a car, you can customize your order at a restaurant. Like it really is tailored specifically to you and going, how do I want to think and how do I want to feel? One example I consider is I want every day of the week to feel like I do on the weekend. Because to me, the weekend feels great. I'm with my family. I'm not sort of running things with such a tight timeline. And there's just a different sort of ethereal vibe to the weekend.
Right.
And I think, why does that only have to exist on the weekend?
Yeah.
I want that every day.
Why is that? I want that every day too.
Well, and I think part of it is really our attitude and our expectations. I mean, there are legitimate threats all around us, but it doesn't help me or do my life any better if I am only focused on threats. So I want to practice changing the channel in my mind that says, hey, yeah, I see that potential job loss, but I also see I'm with my family right now. And right now, nobody can take sort of what I've been through and how I feel away from me. I'm in charge of how I feel. So I'm going to do things that actually contribute to feeling better.
So how do we apply this name entertainment idea to this model then? Because maybe if you name the week the weekend, can you change how you feel about it? Because that's really what it's about. It's like, how do we take, the labels we apply to things, the names we give things, the words we use, the choices, what I think we might call nuance. I'm not really sure how you put that into play with the power of words, but the difference between, like you said before, being anxious or being excited, fundamentally it's almost the same feeling, but from a nuance level, it's very different. It's one direction or the other of excitement, negative excitement potentially or positive excitement. How do we apply that to customized thinking?
Well, I think that's a great way to say it, Adam. I really like that nuance, because what we're looking for, even as I talk about the different brains, we want a symphony. I mean, I'm not going to fire the woodwind section because I don't like a violin, right? So I don't want to fire a certain part of my brain like, you're not really helpful. I don't need to see that. But what we need is a sense of congruence. And so, sure, not every day of the week can feel exactly like the weekend. So I'm not going to say this is how I feel, but I have to actually believe it for it to impact my mind, my brain, and my body in the way in which I desire it to. And so I might use the words like, I strive for every day to have a feeling that reminds me of exactly how I feel on the weekend, so that I don't lose sight that like every day really is a gift and I get to enjoy every day of my life to some degree. And so another example might be, I'm living out in the Pacific Northwest. A lot of people have negative feelings about the weather. Imagine that. But so if someone were to say that they just need to learn to love it, that's going to create what we call cognitive dissonance. It doesn't fit. So it doesn't matter how much I'm like, oh, I do love the gray. I do love the clouds. It's not going to jive with me. And so it won't stick. So instead, I can say, I love the way in which the rain creates the green. And in the summer, when it is green, it is amazing.
This idea of learning to live with it, though, get over it. It is what it is. Like there's so many phrases we use to say just that, like just learn to live with it. What is it called again?
Cognitive dissonance.
And what does that mean when you play it out?
It doesn't go together.
Okay.
So that if you're like, oh, just do it, you just need to get over it. Like, that really isn't helpful either, because your body's giving you a signal and your brain is telling you, I don't like this sensation. I don't like how this feels. I mean, a lot of people will say, oh, I just hate the gray, and the gray is just overwhelming. And so we have to go, well, what's my emotional buy-in? Like, what do I like? How does that even allow me to enjoy something else? And so I'm going to look at going, you know what? I really like that I get to wear warm clothes, or I really do love my coffee because it's for such a long time, it's gray and rainy. I want to be inside by a fire drinking my coffee.
Right.
And so how can I look for going, you know what? If I do these things I might not want to do, I do get some more of what I do want to do. And so it's really almost like a bartering system in your brain of saying, if you do this thing you don't like, you get this thing you do like. Or, you know, I know you don't have to make yourself do this thing unless you can see a way in which it actually benefits you or speaks to you emotionally. Everything, Adam, really has to have this emotional buy-in. And if there's no good emotion, the primary neurochemical in our brain is dopamine for feeling good. I don't get some hit of dopamine, my brain's going to be like, it's not worth it. And I'm not going to do it. Period.
That's a preview of Brain Science. If you love where we're going with this, send us an email to get on the list to be notified the very moment this show gets released. Email us at editors@changelog.com. In the subject line, put in all caps, Brain Science with a couple bangs if you're really excited. You can also subscribe to our master feed to get all of our shows in one single feed. Head to changelog.com/master or search in your podcast app for Changelog Master. You'll find it. Subscribe, get all of our shows, and even those that only hit the master feed. Again, changelog.com/master.